Hey everybody, I'm Anna McEwen. And now for Bob Switzer with the Epic Narrative.
Hey, welcome back to the Epic Narrative. Thank you once again for that amazing introduction. I love my team. I really do. I can't tell you how awesome it is to have such wonderful people around you. And I hope, honestly, that all of you know what it's like to have wonderful people around you. I really, really do, because it is such a blessing. It's a blessing continually in my life. Now, at the time of this recording, which is in the month of February of the year 2022, I am currently sitting in the back of my pickup truck, in the back seat of my pickup truck, and we are on the road. Now, some of you, if you're following me live on in my life, you know this because I've been posting all about it. But I'm sitting out here and it's raining, and it's just kind of a bizarre, cool little moment sitting in the back seat of my truck doing this. But who knows where I'll be when you're actually listening to this, because I don't know where I'll be when you're actually listening to this. But I do know this: I appreciate you listening. Oh no, I remember the title of last week's episode was Almost Raped, and I didn't really expound on that much. I might have in my afterthoughts regarding it, but once again, like the rape is all about the destruction of innocence and the execution of power, like the exertion of power. And that's what had happened to Joseph. He was almost raped physically, but he was raped of his innocence. He's innocent. And that's where we pick up here in chapter 40 of the book of Genesis. Now, I think we'll deal with this chapter. It shouldn't take us long. It's a pretty standard story in the life of Joseph. Pretty much what what are you laughing at? Bob's over here laughing. It won't take long. Right? You're right. I don't know. I think that because I just think it's not that long of a story. It's like whatever, 20 verses long. Like I know. It's the worst thing. Bob's like, every preacher who goes overtime starts out with the phrase, I'm not going to be here very long today. I'm not going to keep you here long today. Or the preacher who keeps saying, okay, my closing thought, just one more thought before we go. I know. I am a preacher at heart, and I probably will go long. No, I won't go long. I'll try. I keep looking at my notes going, this is not going to take long. But I also know that's not a good plan. All right, so we'll just see how long we go. That's a good phrase. We'll see how long this takes, but we've got a relatively short chapter. We'll see how long it takes. Chapter 40, verse 1. Sometime later, the cupbearer. Wait, sometime later. I'm going to stop there. If you've listened to me at all, you know how important time is in the writing of Scripture. Sometime equals about 9 years. What? It's true. 9 years he's been in prison. Now, at last stop, we saw that everywhere he went, people were blessed, right? And it said that the warden didn't care about anything that was going on in the jail or in the prison because Joseph was in charge. So the warden has had 9 years of semi-retirement. He goes into work, hangs out with his friends, goes out for a bagel, comes back in, checks his email, leaves again, goes for a long lunch along the wharf, comes back, checks in with the secretary, meets with a couple dignitaries, walks away. I mean, honestly, this guy has been living the life since Joseph showed up. And I don't blame him. He literally hasn't had to worry about a thing. He has some ceremonial things he has to do because, he takes care of all the political prisoners. He takes care of the important people that have gotten in trouble, ambassadors and merchants and and sea captains and generals and politicians and counselors and psychics, all of whom have offended the Pharaoh in some way. And the Pharaoh would send him away to prison because he had to, because he was, quote, a god, and he couldn't be wrong. So even if the people were innocent, they had to be taken care of. You know, they had to be put in prison because he said so. And he couldn't bring them back out without some sort of, literal format of some sort of spiritual enlightenment, because he couldn't be wrong. He was a god. So his prison was one that really bent to the will of the Pharaoh. And Joseph ran it. And Joseph ran it under the guise of the captain of the king guards, in other words, Potiphar. Potiphar, the prison was under Potiphar's rule. So the fact that Potiphar brought Joseph to the prison again was a big fat deal. It made it clear who he believed. It made it clear that Joseph was supposed to be cared for. And now the fact that he oversees the prison was of no surprise to Potiphar. And Potiphar probably knew, listen, this is the best life I could give you, given what is going on. And if my wife was a nobody, I would have never done it. And I have a feeling Potiphar had spent probably a lot of time with Joseph. He probably stopped by and saw him on the regular. It was his prison to oversee. I mean, the warden would have said, whatever, just you should see what Joseph's doing. Well, maybe I'll stop by and say hi. Maybe I'll come by and see how things are going at the prison. And I'm sure Joseph would have been in those meetings. He would have been called to the office. He would have sat down. I'm sure Potiphar probably said to him, I'm sure of this. Now, again, it's not in the writings, but I can totally see this happening, where Potiphar would have made it known to Joseph, listen, this is the best life I can give you for right now. I can't bring you back because my wife is the high priest's daughter. And if I accuse her of lying, then I'm going to be in prison. I can't upset the high priest because he has as much pull, as sometimes more pull with Pharaoh than I do. And I'm not going to start a war over this. So I've done the best I can for you, given the circumstances. I mean, there was no judge or jury. There was no court system for him to go through. The decision had been made. So innocent or not, it didn't matter. He had the best life he could. And for 9 years, he's been in prison. Now, I do know that this ruins the whole orange or apple tree that grows from the crack in the ground, and the Academy Award-winning or Grammy Award-winning song that was written about Joseph in the prison, and how the water drips down through the hole and waters the plant. And by the time he's out of prison, it's a full bloom and there's all kinds of oranges and yada, yada, yada. It's a beautiful, beautiful song, and beautifully displayed and wonderfully written. And I love the whole cartoon. It's just not in the Bible, but that's okay. It's okay. It's a beautiful thing. You can hang on to your picture from the Prince of Egypt if that's what you want. It really, really is. I don't mean to ruin it. I just want to deal with what I know is written here in the scripture. So Bob's like screaming in the background, no, you didn't. What am I going to do? My childhood. Sorry, Bob. Life's rough sometimes when you're faced with the facts. Oh, glory. 9 years. And everything in the prison feels good. I know at the end of the day you're still in prison. I get that. But the prisoners are well cared for. They are well fed. The prison is clean. There is the general atmosphere is one of peace and some level of hope. And I'll illustrate. I think that's illustrated in this chapter pretty clearly. There's a place of rest that occurs. It's a fascinating atmosphere. Oh man, I'm sorry. I hit the off button. Oh my gosh, I don't even know where I landed. I don't even know. This is what I know. So some of this might be repeated. Brian, you might have to clean this up a little bit. But when you're in a place where, well, not when if you stay connected to heaven's perspective, then you will always carry with you heaven's perspective on your circumstances. So your interaction with your circumstances is going to be from a place of love and hope and joy and peace and freedom and grace and love. I already covered that one. Grace and kindness and humility. And all of this is going on in the prison. Why? Because Joseph is in charge, and Joseph understands what it's like to be in a place of favor. He understands heaven's perspective on what's going on. It doesn't mean that he suddenly thinks, well, God did this to me. And we see that later on in the chapter. But he understands his circumstances for what they are, and he doesn't try to whine and complain his way out of it. He lives a life of connection to heaven, and he interacts with the circumstances accordingly. And so everyone around him is blessed. Everyone in that prison is blessed because of Joseph, and they all know it. And at some level, there's a large chunk of humility that comes from the warden. For the last 9 years, he lets somebody else, literally a prisoner, run the prison because he knows it's being done better. And I've got to give him huge props for that, because I very seldom have found a leader who is humble enough to let somebody who's a better leader run their show. And usually it just comes down to ego. They're afraid that somebody else is going to get credit, so they just keep, in essence, using the person and keeping them hemmed in or caged in. It's like, this guy's amazing, he's talented, or she's amazing and she's talented, but we're not going to let her really take off. We're not going to really let him have great influence in the decisions that are being made, because if we do, somebody's going to know that I'm not running the show. Do you understand the warden's humility in stepping back and saying, you know what? This guy ran Potiphar's house. I know this. Potiphar brought him here, and I watched him. And within months, everything this guy touched was better. Everyone this guy interacted with was better. I'm going to let him run. I mean, he literally let him run the prison. 9 years this has been going on. I got to give this guy huge props for this. I don't know him. I don't know what gods or idols or whatever he might have worshipped, but the man had a sense of humility. He understood and recognized people's giftings and the favor of the, we'll just call it the favor of the gods. They might not have known who Joseph worshiped, but it was clear to them that there was a spiritual connection. And I say them because Potiphar recognized it, as did Potiphar's wife, and now the warden. They recognize the spiritual favor that comes on Joseph and anybody who lets him take off with the authority to run things, and he let him do that to the prison, which is just awesome. And a lesson for a lot of people who are in leadership, because I believe God will bring you people who have greater skills than you so that you can release them into a greater place of favor, and you will reap the benefits of that. You don't think the warden reaped the benefits of a prison that's so well run? You don't think that he saw we'll say promotions, I don't know, raises in his money or increase in his land and his flocks because the prison is being run so well? There are fights breaking out, people aren't being abused. The Pharaoh's happy. Anybody who comes, other ambassadors that come to observe it, come and observe a prison where everybody is calm, everybody stays in the jail. I mean, it's fascinating what could have happened here, and probably something that is often overlooked in the story is this whole gamut of impact that Joseph has had for years in the prison. Then Bob's like, Yeah, verse 2, Bob. Yeah, I know. You said this was going to be short. I know I did. I know. And we've gone, 15 minutes and we're still on verse 2. Okay. Okay. Your point is well taken. Thank you so much. Pharaoh was angry with his two officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, Potiphar, in the same prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard, Potiphar, assigned them to Joseph, and he attended them. Sorry, lost my place. After they had been in custody for some time, each of the two men, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were being held in prison, had a dream the same night. Each dream had a meaning of its own. When Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw they were dejected. So here we go. This is where I'm talking about the atmosphere of heaven that was seen, and it not just seen, but lived in by the prisoners. Joseph had created a place of love and hope and grace, and it's a place where people could dream. You don't get that in an atmosphere that is filled with disappointment, rejection, abuse. It's tough to dream in a place like that. And I'm not saying you can't. I'm saying it's very difficult. It's very difficult. But Joseph had created an atmosphere in that prison, not because he changed the rules, which so many people want to do, right? They all want to legislate. They all want to change the laws to force people to do things. Joseph changed the atmosphere just by being himself and staying connected to heaven, staying connected to the character of God. We could throw this all the way back to the beginning, staying connected to his true identity and understanding that he picked up through the training of the spiritual training of his grandfather Abraham, who was trained by Noah, who knew Adam. This whole deal goes back to identity. Joseph understood who he was. He understood who he was created to represent on this planet. And he stayed connected in the spiritual realm to that place. And it impacted everyone that came in contact with him. So the cupbearer and the baker are thrown into prison. Now, tradition says the cupbearer was thrown in because there was a fly in the wine, in the cup of wine that the Pharaoh was drinking from. So I don't know. Again, I don't know if that's true, but I get it. And the Pharaoh just throws him in prison. Now, that seems a little harsh, but I guess when you're an egomaniac, a narcissist, somebody who thinks they're a god, you don't put up with stuff like this. It's fascinating to me that someone like Potiphar was still employed. Like, when you're working for somebody of that level of narcissistic behavior, it's got to be insane, right? You constantly have to be careful. So somehow Potiphar's maintaining that, but the cupbearer, a fly got in the cup probably well after he had tasted it and handed it to Pharaoh. Pharaoh puts the cup down, a fly flies in there, and that is his job. His job is to protect the Pharaoh from any sort of infection because we don't want Pharaoh to die. So he's in trouble. He's thrown in prison. And the baker, tradition says that the baker allowed a stone into the bread flour, and so it just happened to be in a piece of bread that the Pharaoh was eating. And he bit on a stone, and he was thrown to prison. Because you see, especially, back then, given the medical community that they were in, if you got an infection in your mouth and it went septic, you were done. You were dead. They knew you can't be chipping your teeth. And it's not like they had dentists. And I mean, I know that they had some actually kind of crazy ways that they would brush their teeth and kind of clean up, but it's not to the level that we are today. And it's fascinating to me, that they knew you can't be chipping your teeth on a piece of rock. So anyways, these two guys are in prison. And they give it to, again, they give them to Potiphar, in essence. Potiphar passes them off to the warden. Warden brings them in, and he's like, make sure they go under Joseph. Make sure he's the one overseeing them. And warden's like, absolutely, I'll make sure that happens. Now, pretty much everyone was under Joseph's care at this point because that's what Joseph did. He took care of all the prisoners at the prison. But these two were specially placed in his care, probably because Potiphar understood that the Pharaoh was a little out of line by sending them both to prison for such a minor offense. But you couldn't counteract the Pharaoh because that would mean your death sentence. So he just sends them in. He's like, make sure they go to Joseph's prison. He'll take care of them. So it says sometime later, which means about a year. So this is the 10th year for Joseph. But he had made a place in that prison where people could still dream. And he made a place where people had a relationship. He was a type of leader who, unlike, if you watch Narcos on Netflix, right? And you see the drug lords that get put in prison and they take over the prison and they do it through force and they do it through violence and they get all that going on. Joseph ran the prison from a completely different paradigm. But everything that went on in the prison, Joseph knew about. So much so that he would check in on everybody and he would see everybody and he could recognize the countenance. In other words, he understood when their faces didn't look good in the morning. He walks by in the morning and he saw that they were dejected. They had had a dream and they're confused. Now, I understand that dreams are a language of heaven. And I understand that there are many approaches to the way to interpret dreams. I happen to take an approach to interpreting dreams where all dreams are good. All dreams can come from heaven. I know that for some, they're like, well, some are dark dreams, some are soul dreams, some are just, bad pizza dreams, some are spiritual dreams from heaven. Like, it all depends on the colors and the shapes and the shadows and the people. And I've taken those courses. I've listened to those people. They are highly intelligent. And I say, wow, amazing. As you know, I have a very radical approach to the goodness of God. I believe His goodness is always there. So even in my head, even if the enemy sends you a dream, I believe God's goodness is there. And He takes the evil dream that the enemy sends you and actually turns it into an opportunity to discern the enemy's plans. And He destroys the plans of the enemy by giving you discernment on how to understand what's going on in the dream. So I'm big about the goodness of God, even in dreams. So if I'm asked to do a dream interpretation, and I do get asked, I don't approach it by ever saying like, well, this one's evil. I approach it every time by saying, what is God trying to get through? What is God saying in this dream? I think sometimes the nightmares that people have, I call it like the type of dream you have, there's like a volume button. And sometimes we have like really nice, gentle dreams for probably days or weeks, and we don't pay much attention to them because they're just nice little dreams. And then the volume gets turned up. And then we wake up one night and we're like, oh my God, what just happened? And that's just the volume getting louder, like God's trying to communicate, and He finally gets through. Because He might have, maybe you woke up during the dream. But I don't think He sends you evil. I don't think He sends you nightmares. I do think He can send you good information and take advantage of those things by giving you good discernment about what the enemy's doing. Okay, enough about dreams. From my perspective anyways. So here we go. So he sees that they're dejected. So he asks Pharaoh's officials who were in custody with him at the master's house. He said, why do you look so sad today? Well, we both had dreams, they said, but there is no one to interpret them. Then Joseph said, do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams. You see, they had grown up in a culture, right? If there was anybody that was going to interpret dreams, they had the job of dream interpretation. They were the sorcerers, the astrologers, They were the witches. They were people in the court of Pharaoh. There were people in the marketplace that you would go to, soothsayers, palm readers, spiritualists. You would go to them. You'd go to the great grandma down the street who was blind but could hold your hand and get interpreted. Like, there was all kinds of ways that you would get dream interpretations, but none of those people were in prison. So they were bummed out. And Joseph's like, what's going on, guys? Why you seem so sad? They're like, oh man, we had a dream last night and there's nobody around here we can talk to about it. He's like, oh, you can talk to me. I'm in connection with the guy who gives all the dreams. So let me know what were your dreams? I'll interpret them for you. They're like, really? Get out. Okay. Like, they were so excited. They were going to get some answers. So the cupbearer goes first. He's like, so in my dream, I saw a vine in front of me, and on the vine were 3 branches. And as soon as it budded, it blossomed, and its clusters ripened right into grapes, like boom, boom, boom. And Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and I squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup and put the cup in his hand. And Joseph is listening now. Again, I only have my way of doing things kind of as a way to see this in my dream, or as the words are spoken. So I pictured Joseph nodding and listening and maybe even closing his eyes and kind of getting the full picture of what's going on. And he's like, okay, I got it. And he's just interacting with heaven all the whole time. Like, what do you see, God? What are you trying to say here, God? What are you trying to say? And he goes, all right, so this is what this means. 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh's going to lift up your head and restore your position, and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as you did when you were his cupbearer. But when all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh. Get me out of prison. I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing to deserve being put in the dungeon. So I want to pause there, because this is important, I think. He says, in 3 days, you're going to be restored. You're going to be trusted by the Pharaoh once again. You're going to be trusted. Not only are you going to be released from prison, you're actually going to be restored to your position standing next to the Pharaoh. So he's been in prison for a year. I don't know who else has been doing his job, but maybe they didn't do as good of a job. I don't know what the circumstances are in the palace that are going to cause Pharaoh to call his cupbearer back out of prison. What is going on spiritually that would allow the Pharaoh to say, yeah, I need that guy out of prison. I might have made a mistake, or he's paid his dues, or whatever. Like, all of that to me is a vast mystery that allows for a ton of opportunity of imagination as to what went on and why the Pharaoh, in essence, changed his mind, which was not something Pharaoh did very often, which is why what Joseph said is even more fascinating. Because here, right, is the first time, verse 15, we see the first time that he declares his innocence. It's the first time in the whole story of Joseph that Joseph says, what I did to get here is nothing. I literally have done nothing to deserve this. He says, I am not a slave by birth. I was forcibly taken here, carried off from the land, my homeland, the land of the Hebrews. I am not a slave by choice. I didn't choose to go into slavery in order to, make a living. I have been forced here to Egypt. I was forced into slavery, and I've been forced into prison, having done nothing wrong. Please remember me, because things are going to go well for you. You're going to have the ear of the Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh can get me out. Because if Pharaoh says, Potiphar's servant is free to go, then I'm free to go. I don't need my job back. I'm not looking for that position again. I don't need to be recognized in the house of Pharaoh. I don't even need to be seen, as innocent in anybody's eyes. I just want to go home. Very interesting little interaction there. So the baker gets all excited, right? He's like, oh, this is awesome. We both had good dreams. So yeah, this is what happened to me. I also had a dream. On my head were 3 baskets of bread. On the top baskets were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head. He's thinking, this is awesome, right? And Joseph's like, oh, okay, listen, the 3 baskets are 3 days. Oh, okay. You are not going to be trusted by Pharaoh because you can't protect him anymore. And the birds are generally scavengers, right? They are people who come and pluck things from unprotected, animals on the ground, or food on the ground or in the water. Like they come and eat what can't be protected, things that have been thrown out for them. And so the Lord's saying, you're not going to make it. Pharaoh's going to be mad at you, still understanding that you didn't protect him, and he's going to behead you in 3 days. And the birds will come and eat you. And again, now I would have framed that differently, but that's okay. That's just me. This is the way Joseph framed it. The baker knows what's going on. Within 3 days, it was Pharaoh's birthday. Everybody's having a good time. I'm guessing a birthday party for Pharaoh probably went at least a week long. He gives a feast for all of his officials, and he brings out of prison the chief cupbearer and the chief baker into the presence of all his officials, and he restores the cupbearer to his position. So he once again put the cup in Pharaoh's hand. Maybe in all of this, Pharaoh recognizes, listen, the fly was something that was probably out of his control. And maybe he misses the advice that the guy gave, because cupbearers often, because literally their position, their physical position was right next to Pharaoh during these parties. So they heard all the ambassadors and all the merchants that would come and speak to the king, and they would listen. They weren't advisors in the moment, but oftentimes Pharaoh's kings would look for kind of an outside voice, and cupbearers were often that trusted voice. So I'm guessing in some way the Pharaoh was missing that voice, and whoever was doing the job in between for that last year was somebody who he didn't like, maybe somebody who saw it as a political advantage and was trying to take advantage of his role. And the Pharaoh wanted somebody back who was just humble, wise, and he knew who to get, so he got him. He brought him back. He lifted him up. But the chief baker, he did not. No, he impaled the baker just like Joseph said. He put him on a stake and stuck him outside. But it says the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. So Joseph makes a plea for the first time, like I said, in verse 15. He's like, I'm innocent. I'm not a slave by birth. I'm not a slave by choice. I just want out of this unjust punishment. This is just not fair. It's the only time that we've seen Joseph try and go outside the plan of God, outside the, and again, I don't think it's God's plan for bad things to happen to Joseph. But as far as Joseph is concerned, he's looking at this going, all right, maybe I need to make something happen. I mean, this is, for a prison life, I've got a pretty good life. And for a slave's life, I had a pretty good life. But this is not my life. And it's not like I wanted to come down here. I'd like to go back. I'd like to see my father. I'd like to see my brothers. But man forgot Joseph, but God didn't. And that's always an encouragement, I think, for people. We often come to a place where we think we're forgotten by everyone. Be confident, God has not forgotten you. Why? Because he can't forget you. Because he made you and formed you from the beginning. He formed you in a place of love and light and hope. He formed you in a place where your true identity and destiny and and origin are all places of purity and cannot be corrupted. It's a place of incorruption. That means it's impossible to corrupt what God has created. So even though you may feel left out and alone and disappointed and rejected, know that your identity is incorruptible because it was created in the beginning. From the beginning came your identity. From the beginning, you were created to represent the person of God, the character of God, and the atmosphere of heaven here in creation. And I strive to do better at that because I know it's possible, because I know it's within me. And I know that all of creation groans for the sons of God to understand their true identity. So I hope you do the same. And I'll see you again on the Epic Narrative.
Don't go anywhere. We've got Bob Thoughts.
Hey everyone, welcome once again to Bob Thoughts at the end of our show. Currently I'm watching our new little puppy. His name is Kappa, and he is adorable, but you may hear him in the background because he's a little schnookum sometimes. And I don't know what it is about them, but they always seem to know just about the time that you need them to be quiet or still. It's like, oh, I should bite something and do something wrong. What is the deal with puppies? Anyways, he's adorable. And if you want lots of pictures, you can follow him on Instagram under Zacappy, Zacappy, makes me happy, all one word. And he's on Instagram, and you can get to know a little bit about his history, and there's photos of him, and he is just a doll. We've had him now, at the time of this recording, we've had him for a little over 2 weeks, and he's already gained like 4 pounds, and he's a mini doxy and adorable, long-haired cream, and he is running around looking for trouble. Anyway, on to Joseph. I just wanted to touch on this whole idea that, that God caused bad things to happen in order for him to do good things, that he needed Joseph in prison, yada, yada, yada. And I don't buy it. You guys know that if you listen to us at all on the Epic Narrative, you know that I believe God's goodness is always there because God never leaves you or forsakes you, and there's nothing you can do to ever lose it. So you can get yourself, or the enemy might get you into some pretty bad situations, and God's goodness is always going to come through, just always is. And you may feel forgotten by God because that's what it feels like, but the truth is you're not forgotten by him because the truth overrides your feelings. And Joseph felt alone, and I think that's why he asked the cupbearer to remember him. He was like, listen, maybe God's forgotten. Maybe I just need to go home, or at least get out of here, at least go back to my land. I might not be able to go back to my family, but because he has no idea. Remember, his dad's never reached out for him. He doesn't know what the story was back to the father. He knows that him and his brothers made a covenant not to tell anybody what happened. So he's not saying anything. He's keeping his end of the bargain. But at some level, I think he's wrestling. To me, it indicates a wrestling, and that's a natural thing. Like don't think of yourself as being less than because you have those feelings of being abandoned, or you have those thoughts of God's doing this to me because I've been such a bad person, or I must have made a bad choice, or somebody I know, but he, caused this me to be open to God, had to do this. Just live in your circumstances with the confidence that God's goodness has not left you. And that kind of confidence is what breeds hope. And hope is a I double clutch because you guys probably know this as well. You can live in hope and it's a really powerful place to live. But you can also when hope is delayed, it can really drive you crazy. And internally, you just feel it's like, why? Why am I hoping anymore? Why is there any hope? So just keep going back to the character of God. He never leaves you. He never forsakes you. He's always good. He's always loving. He's always going to be there. I guess I said that a couple different ways, but go to those truths and hang on to them. You know, in my current situation, it's easy. It's an easy road to run down and be like, hey, God's forgotten us. We tried to obey him. We did what he called us to do. And here we are, still in an RV, still no job, real job. I work, but I'm not making a living. I'm not even making bills, right? I'm just making them less expensive to take out of savings. And it's, I could look at all that and be like, God, clearly I missed it. I have failed. And, I just need to get right and get back with you so that your goodness can be around me again. And it's like, no, I haven't missed it. And God's goodness is still there. And there's nothing that I've lost because of this. There's always gain, always promotion, always opportunity to become deeper in our faith and in our trust and in our walk with God. That's what his goodness is always there for. He always makes you better, always brings you closer to your true identity, to your purpose, to your destiny. And that's what we believe. That's what we teach. And I believe it's all throughout Scripture. And we're going to see it again, I'm sure, next week on The Epic Narrative.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe to this podcast on any platform you use. You can also reach out to Bob for questions or booking at thebobswitzer.com or email him at thebobswitzer@gmail.com. See you next week, guys.